Today, we're going to connect the dots between a tragic, pivotal moment in history and a very real, present-day call to action right here in Canada. We're drawing a line from Sharpeville, South Africa, all the way to Charlottetown, PEI, to talk about the ongoing journey toward racial equity.
But first, I want you to just look at this number, 69. It's more than just a number. It represents 69 lives, a moment that changed the world, and honestly, it's the whole reason we're talking about this today.
So that number? It's tied forever to March 21st. We now know it as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. But before it was a day of observance, it was a day of incredible loss and unbelievable resistance.
On that day, back in 1960, thousands of people gathered to peacefully protest apartheid's past laws. And listen, these weren't just ID cards. They were instruments of a brutal system, designed specifically to control where Black South Africans could live, where they could work, and how they could move through their own country.
The protest was peaceful. The intention was peaceful. But the official response? It was anything but. What happened next would be etched into history as the Sharpeville massacre.
So you have this peaceful demonstration, and then, without warning, police opened fire into the crowd. 69 people were killed, over 180 were injured, and here's the detail that is just chilling. Many were shot in the back as they were running away. That fact alone exposed the sheer cruelty of the apartheid regime and sparked outrage all around the globe.
You know, the shockwaves from Sharpeville were massive. It mobilized a global movement. This was no longer an injustice that could be ignored. And by 1966, the United Nations made it official, setting aside March 21st as a day for the whole world to reflect and, this is the important part, to act against racial discrimination wherever it exists.
Okay, so this is where we pivot. Because history isn't just something that happened back then. It's like a mirror, and it forces us to turn our gaze away from a global memory and look closely at our own local realities. And that brings up a really important question.
So you might be wondering, what on earth does a massacre that happened in South Africa over 60 years ago have to do with life in Canada today, specifically in a place like Prince Edward Island?
Well, here's the connection. Sharpeville is a brutal reminder that systemic racism isn't just about a few prejudiced people. It's about how our systems and our policies are built. It's structured, it's designed, and it continues unless it's actively, purposefully challenged. And those systems, well, they exist everywhere, in different forms, even in places we think of as peaceful.
And that brings us right here, to Prince Edward Island. For the Black community there, racial inequity isn't some historical concept. No, it's a daily lived reality. But it's a reality that's being met with just incredible strength and resilience.
So let's break down what that actually looks like. We're talking about real, tangible barriers to getting a job. The deep frustration of having your skills and credentials from another country just not recognized. The heavy weight of social isolation when you don't see yourself represented. All of this creates huge mental health challenges. And on top of it, there's a serious lack of services that actually understand these unique, culturally specific experiences.
But, and this is so important, the community is not defined by these struggles. Absolutely not. In the face of all this, they are building these powerful networks of care. They're celebrating their culture, their heritage, and they are the ones leading the charge, advocating for real equity and inclusion for everyone on the island.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. This work has a name. It has a face. Groups like the Black Cultural Society of PEI and New African Canadians are the engines driving this resilience. They're on the ground, day in and day out, creating safe spaces, giving support, and pushing for change.
So if we see those challenges as the problem, then the work these organizations are doing, that's the essential response. It's the active challenge to the systems that Sharpeville taught us we have to confront.
And let's be really clear what essential means here. These groups aren't just, optional extras or a nice to have. They are vital community infrastructure. They provide that culturally relevant support that's missing elsewhere. They create safe spaces for people to connect and heal. And they advocate for the big picture systemic changes that actually benefit everyone.
Which brings us to the final, and maybe the most crucial point of all. It's one thing to say these organizations are essential. It's another thing entirely to back that up with real, tangible, meaningful investment.
This slide really lays out the choice, doesn't it? On one hand, you've got the current reality. Funding is limited, it's often short-term, and there's a huge reliance on volunteers who are already stretched thin. The capacity is just constrained. But on the other hand, look at the opportunity. With sustained investment, you get expanded services, stronger youth leadership, and just plain healthier, more inclusive communities for all of PEI.
So let's bring it all the way back. At its very core, the story of Sharpeville is a story about voices being brutally, violently silenced for demanding justice.
The story we have to write today, in places like Charlottetown, has to be different. It must be about voices being heard.
It must be about communities being actively and meaningfully supported.
And most of all, it must be about equity being resourced, not just talked about in meetings, but funded, because it's essential work.
The message from all of this couldn't be clearer. From the Sharpeville massacre to Charlottetown, the call remains the same. Dignity, justice, and equity are not optional. They must be funded, protected, and lived. When we invest in Black-led organizations, we are not just supporting communities, we are correcting history and shaping a more just future. It really leaves you with something to think about, doesn't it? When we decide to truly support this work, what part of history are we choosing to write next?